Welcome to today's webinar, courtesy of the Kentucky Small Business Development Center in Louisville. Discover no-cost, valuable business services to help you thrive, whether starting your entrepreneurial journey or scaling your existing business. We have the resources and expertise to help you succeed. For more information, please visit our website or text 502-977-5800. Thank you for joining us today. Feel free to use the chat feature to ask questions or engage with our speaker. Let's get started.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Toolkit Tuesday here with the Louisville Small Business Development Center. I see that folks are popping on into the Zoom room for our presentation today about creative funding hacks when the bank says no, which is not ever a question we want to hear, but sometimes it's what happens. So we're here to help you kind of navigate through that process. I'm Claire Bridges. I'm a coach here at the Louisville Small Business Development Center. I'm joined here today with Janet Flaw, who's our communications director. She runs all the back-end programming. If you wouldn't mind to put your name in the chat, tell us where you are watching from today, where you're joining from. We always love to see who's with us. So we'll just make sure that chat is working and go ahead and drop your name in there before we get started. Okay, we've got Portia from Louisville, Lisa from Louisville. Terrence, well, a big Louisville fan group today. Marie, Avella, wonderful. Okay, Bobby Haskins. Okay, here we go. Wheelersburg, Ohio. You win for the furthest out. Welcome. Thanks for joining. Okay, well, we're going to get started. I'm going to pull up my presentation here, and we will start talking about creative funding hacks. So as small business owners, once we are have a great idea, ready to get our business started, the only thing kind of blocking us is the funding piece of things many times. And so this is kind of a way to navigate through those problems, through those issues, whether you're in the startup phase or whether you're in the expansion phase. There's just kind of some different criteria, some different kind of pre-situations that you can be in to set yourself up for getting funding with easy solutions as opposed to just being denied at the bank. So creative funding hacks when the bank says no. And just to remind you, we're the Small Business Development Center. We offer free one-on-one coaching services, as well as webinars like this and many others on different topics around running a small business. The one-on-one coaching sessions are great to kind of meet right where you're at in your business, talk through pain points, questions you have, things in the future that are coming up or that you are planning for. We also work in a great deal with financial projections, getting you ready for bank funding, and essentially matching you with lenders that seem to fit what you're looking for. So that's a little bit about the SBDC. Myself, I'm a coach, and then two other coaches, our center director, Dave Edkin, and another coach, Rhonda Jones. You'll be available to meet with us after this. I've got my info at the end of the slides, and we can share everyone else's as well. So kind of the first piece of this is you've got this great business idea. It's finally dawned on you. You've been thinking about it, for mulling it over, maybe even for years. And you finally, got the $1 million idea, right? That's what we all hope to have. I've got a great idea for a small business. And so I've got you running over to the bank to apply for a loan. The only thing you need is that money to get started, right? So you go to the bank, ABC Bank, and you say, lender, I have a great idea for a small business. I've got a few ideas written down. I think I'm going to need about 500,000 to get started. You apply for the loan. And you think, okay, I'm on my way. This is great. We're moving somewhere. I applied for my loan. I'm on my way, right? But what happens next is you get denied. You get rejected by the bank. You feel totally defeated. You may not even get a solid rejection letter. You may just kind of end up having no communication or no follow-up with the lender because they see that you're not quite prepared, or that the dollar amount you're asking for isn't a realistic dollar amount, or you haven't really made appropriate plans for how you're going to go to market, so on and so forth. You feel totally defeated. You're back to square one. What are you going to do? Don't worry. You're going to come to the SBDC and meet with a coach. We're going to give you a thumbs up and we're going to help you get there. So, how do I secure a $500,000 loan to start my new business? That's what I have these conversations all day long. I just need this much money and then I'm going to get started and be good to go. And I ask a few more questions. I delve a little deeper into your planning, your research, what you have put in place so far. And often what I find is that there's not tangible action plans to move forward with the business. If you apply for a loan for like a traditional bank loan, they will often ask for a business plan. What a business plan is can be very vague or very specific. When you're applying for funding, it needs to be very specific. And so if you haven't, researched how you're going to market, your marketing options, your operation systems, the summary of the business, how it's operating in a day-to-day function in its physical location, the bank's not even going to give it a second chance or a second thought. So first, we're going to talk about writing your business plan. And this is going to go into great detail about the operations of the business, your experience in the past in running a business or having skill sets that help you run a business. And then here's all the breakdown of the business plan is a summary of the business, a marketing plan, a management plan. And then the last piece is that financial plan. And I would say when you're applying for funding, that's the most important piece to include in a business plan. And so we create financial projections together with you. We create what we call critical assumptions around your business. So what makes it, run every day? What are your operating costs? What is the average ticket cost for your product or your service? How many customers do you think you're going to be serving in a week, a month, a quarter? How are you going to organically grow over time so that we can show a really solid story through numbers to a bank to make them feel safe and secure in lending to you? So creating those financial projections is another piece that you'll need in order to apply for the loan. And then another piece for applying for funding is the 5 C's of credit and funding criteria. So these things help assess whether you are worthy of being funded for a certain dollar amount, whether the idea seems sustainable and realistic to a bank, so on and so forth. So we call them the 5 C's. We've got capacity, which is the ability for your business to be successful and pay back the loan in full and on time. Capital is the amount of owner investment that you're putting into the project. Banks often will always like to see that you have skin in the game, that you are equally, if not equally in numbers, but equally invested in the business. So typically 10 to 20% of the total project cost is what they will expect you personally to invest into the project. So say if we go back to that beginning $500,000 number, that means minimum 10% is that you're going to need to invest $50,000 of just cash into the project of your own. The next piece is collateral, and this is a big one that people overlook, is that you have to have dollar for dollar collateral, a secondary means of repayment to put forward towards the loan. So say if you're borrowing $500,000, you're going to have to put something up of $500,000 worth in order to secure that loan, whether that's some of the equipment that you're using in your business that can be used, very often real estate is used for collateral. If you don't have enough real estate or enough equipment to reach that total dollar amount, I have seen people take out a life insurance policy to cover the rest of the collateral. But some way, somehow, you're going to have to get to that dollar amount to cover secondary means of repayment. Next is conditions. So this is very clearly stated out in your business plan, all the ways you're going to be successful, move forward, make sales, so on and so forth. They'll also look a bit at the industry itself, how successful it's doing, how sustainable it is. Is it a riskier industry or is it a pretty safe industry? And then lastly is character. So that's, the way you present yourself, your professionalism, your business plan, and also your credit score. So they will pull a hard credit score when you're applying for that loan. And typically, the lowest kind of range I'll see that's still approved can be around like a 680 to 700, but you really want to be like 720 or above to apply for funding and make sure you're in a good spot for that. So this is the 5 C's of credit and funding criteria that you'll need to have prepared in order to apply for a bank loan. So this may be another reason why you didn't get approved for that initial $500,000. After you learn this information, you might be thinking, yikes, I don't have $50,000 cash to invest in my project. I don't own enough real estate to be used for collateral. I haven't even thought about my marketing plan. I don't have a solid, like, tangible action items that I'm going to do. And I don't even know my competition, so I don't even know how I level up to them. And these are all things that will be included in working with a business coach and then writing your business plan in order to apply for that funding. So again, let's kind of break it down a little bit more into some more actionable steps so that you can get funded. Break down your costs. The first step is to categorize your startup costs. We've got some tools for this. We like to break it down. I'll show some categories that you can use to itemize your startup costs. Next, making a timeline for when the funds are needed. Okay, if your total project costs $500,000, but you aren't using some of that money until much later on in the process, do you want to have to be paying a loan payment for that every month when you're not even making any revenue yet? Probably not. So that's probably not the wisest decision to make from a financial perspective. So we want to make a timeline for when that money is needed and what you're using it for. And then lastly, thinking about how soon you can begin to kind of generate some revenue for yourself, because the more we can prove sales, the better it speaks to your plan overall as well. Here are some example categories for your startup costs. So we've got some nice templates and spreadsheets for this, an exercise that you can kind of work through. And this is where I always have my clients start out, as just kind of making a laundry list of things that you think you'll need. So some startup costs include the building or real estate that you'll need. So whether that's renting a space or purchasing a building, where is your business going to be located if it is a physical address? You'll have to pay, some rent deposits, utilities, things like that to get started. Improvements for the property. So depending on what that property was used for in the past, it may or may not be set up properly for your business. Say you're opening a barbershop. You have to make sure you've got all the plumbing in place, electricity, sinks and chairs and all that. Well, if you're opening a restaurant, that's going to look totally different in that same space. So you have to make sure that you allow or plan for money to be invested into the improvements for the property. You'll also need to purchase equipment for your business, whether you're producing a product, providing a service, or so on. Very often we'll need some type of equipment to operate. And then you'll also need furniture and fixtures to put in the space, whether that's, light fixtures, tables, chairs, benches, couches, desks, all those fun things. Branding your space, making it look a specific way, all goes into that furniture and fixture category. And then some other startup costs are administrative expenses, so paying for, an attorney, an accountant, getting your LLC set up, um, and then any like prepaid expenses that you need for a POS system or a software system that you'll be using. You'll have to have some money up front for those administrative expenses. You will need to purchase inventory for the business in some industries, not in all industries, but if you're selling anything retail wise, food wise, you'll need to have inventory on hand and a good cushion to roll over. So I typically have people schedule or plan for about 2 to 3 months worth of inventory in their startup costs so that they've got a nice cushion there. And they don't need to worry about generating revenue right away in order to buy new inventory for the next turnaround. You will need also some money for advertising, marketing your business as you get started and on a continual basis, but this will be just for the beginning. And then lastly, you'll need working capital. So you can make your rent payments on time, payroll on time, any operating expenses in those first few months before the steady stream of revenue is coming in. So that's a nice overview of your potential startup costs. Obviously, every business is different, industry to industry is different. So some of these apply to folks all the time. Some of them do not apply at all. And I always kind of share, don't worry if you don't have anything in a certain category because it may just not be relevant to the business that you're operating. Once we have these startup costs in place and we have a better kind of overall perspective and then a detailed perspective of the dollar amount that you're going to need and what these what the dollars will be used for, then we're going to create a timeline. So I've pulled some of the startup costs into categories here, and then I've put an amount of time pre-opening. So pre-opening expenses to secure the location and so on, you're going to need some money about 6 months to a year before you open. And then renovations, okay, that's going to take about 6 to 8 months of time to complete, paying contractors, paying for supplies, materials, so on. You will need to order the equipment for your business, probably 1 to 2 months before you open and leaving space for ordering it and delivery time and setting everything up. You will need money for training and marketing. So that's about 6 to 8 weeks before you open. And then also having money on hand for inventory replenishment. You'll want to have that 2 to 3 months after opening. So if you look at this timeline, we can see, okay, I don't need everything all at once. This spans a year or more of time, right? So then we can break down those costs a little bit more to only take the amount we need when we need it. And that gives us a little bit more flexibility and options in terms of how to fund your business. So now we're going to get into our funding hacks. And I've broken these down. We've got 10 different options for funding hacks. So we'll go through all of these and you can see how you can kind of piece together all the different options for funding your business. So we've got bootstrapping, personal equity, crowdfunding, traditional business loans, local loan programs, FF&E financing, tenant improvement allowances, dealership or vendor financing, line of credit, and a ROBS investment. And we'll go into detail on these so that you can understand if they're applicable to you or an option for you. Maybe it's something you haven't heard of before that you're like, oh, if I only knew that, I could have used that to get started, right? So we want to give you all the options possible. We're going to start with bootstrapping. Bootstrapping is a great way to generate revenue, to get going with your sales. This looks like pop-up events where you can just, buy a little bit of inventory for 1 day's worth of sales. Say you're opening a restaurant, you have a little mini event somewhere or at a festival, you generate some revenue, you're able to make some profit and save that. So then you've got that to go forward with a little bit more. If you are selling a product that you make, you can sell some initial prototypes to kind of get out in the market, see if people are interested in the item, make back the initial costs that you had to incur to make the item, and then hopefully a little bit of profit too. Just kind of any way you can make a little bit of dollars here, a little bit there to begin a little savings to get started for further funding. You can also confirm upcoming contracts and take payments or deposits ahead of time. So say if you provide some type of service, say you're an event planner, right now you're trying to get started, you don't have any funds, but you know you've got an event booked in October, you can take a deposit to hold the spot for the October work that you're doing, and then you've got a little chunk of money there to start saving and putting into investing back into your business. So bootstrapping is just kind of little by little growing, kind of very organically, very hands-on to get started. Also, personal equity is another way to bring money into your business. Like I mentioned before, a bank is going to want to see 10 to 20% owner investment for a larger loan. So bootstrapping and personal equity are great ways to begin amassing that owner investment that you will need. You can pull from your cash or savings account. From a personal perspective, you can use home equity if you want to pull, do a HELOC and get home equity out of a piece of real estate that you own. Or you can take a personal loan or an investment from friends or family. And kind of between the equity piece and the bootstrapping, you might be able to create that 10 to 20% owner investment that is needed to apply for a larger loan. Another way to get started, get a little bit of cash on hand is through crowdfunding. This is we're all familiar with GoFundMe's, whether that's a personal ask from someone or a health care scare or something like that, but people can use it for opening a business or even sourcing for a specific project within your business. It allows backers to purchase products or services that are offered to the general public. You can usually receive great feedback on your products this way. It's a way to kind of get the word out ahead of time. You do typically need to offer the backers some type of reward or like an early access, or equity in the business, some little reward for backing your project, for committing to it, exclusive content, something like that. It's great for telling a story. If certain businesses, I think, hit a little better with crowdfunding than others. But if you are, in a business that is helping people or healthcare, animal care, anything that's in the, helping people zone as opposed to just, retail or purchasing zone is going to be a really nice story to tell. And that's where people can really generate a lot from crowdfunding. I've got a reference down here that's a bit more on crowdfunding. That's from a Shopify blog. And then we've also they did a nice breakdown of different crowdfunding options. And I really like how they've categorized these different crowdfunding options for what they are best used for. So best overall was Kickstarter, and then the runner-up was Indiegogo. However, for small businesses, the best option was Fundable. If you're in like the content creator space, they've got Patreon here. They've got some options for the UK and Europe. Personal fundraising is not so relevant here. And then nonprofit fundraising, real estate crowdfunding, because sometimes loans are not able to be used for real estate in a small business purpose. High growth startups. And then there, again, this Shopify link right here is listed if you have any questions. Portia, I see that you were asked if we will get a copy of the presentation. Yes, you definitely will. So you'll have access to all of this info and be able to reach out to me or the items listed here. So this is a nice way to kind of do some back-end research, see what these platforms require of you as the fundraiser. Like, what do you have to give in order to fundraise? Some have different restrictions or requirements around you can give merchandise away or you cannot give merchandise away. So based on what you're doing, it's just a good list of items to kind of look through and see. Again, crowdfunding, a good way to kind of amass that little chunk of owner investment that you will need to apply for a larger funding later on. see. Next, we've got, yes, traditional business loans. So this is kind of that avenue you may have first gone down. You went to the bank, you had this great idea, you applied for a business loan, got rejected. That is okay because we're going to help you get there in a more realistic way, right? So some different business loan options are SBA 7A loans, which are kind of can be used for general working capital, furniture, fixtures, equipment, all the different categories of startups. The SBA 504 loan program is more geared toward real estate in particular, but they've got some pretty tight restrictions around the use for that real estate. And then there's also microloan programs, which go about $50,000 up to $50,000 or less. And so these are the more traditional bank loans that you would apply for. You can get a small business loan, an SBA loan through traditional banks. Local banks do them too. There's many options in the Louisville area that we keep in touch with lenders all around town and even around the region to know who's offering those and kind of under what different circumstances they like to lend. There's also online lenders that you can apply through. These I have seen often have a bit higher of an interest rate and a good amount higher of an interest rate and maybe some quicker turnaround on the term of the loan. So be wary as you're applying for a loan. You always want to make sure you're set up in a way that's sustainable for you. But these are the more traditional loans that are out there. And yes, they're very often a piece of the puzzle for funding your business entirely, but they usually don't have to cover everything all at once, right? And so applying for a lower dollar amount through a traditional business loan is just the more insured way that you're going to get funded. It's a lower monthly payment that you're going to have to pay back, lower collateral, lower owner investment that you're going to have to put in, all those 5 C's of credit. Just makes it a bit more easily attainable if you can lower that amount and use some of these other hacks or other creative funding options to complement the traditional business loan. There's also local loan programs. So I've listed a few here that we work with all the time. Community Ventures is a CDFI, Community Development Funding Institution. Actually, all of these are CDFIs except for LIDA. So they are focused on helping small businesses. That's what they do. They do SBA lending, but they are themselves not a bank. And they have loan programs specifically made for small businesses. So Community Ventures is one option as a local loan program. There's also Park Community Credit Union, another great local option. They have even a very small micro loan of $10,000 that has helped many of my clients along the way. If you just have that little gap to bridge to get started or to invest in a new piece of equipment or something like that, that $10,000 microloan is a great option. Louisville Economic Development Alliance, they're a new program under the city, and they are doing some work around equipment mostly right now, but they're kind of regrouping to find some other options in terms of lending to small businesses. And then LHOME is another great option for small business. I think we've got a question here in the chat. Let's see. Are these options specific to certain counties? No, most all of these would lend all around Kentucky and also probably in the southern Indiana region as well. Some other kind of perks around the local loan programs is that they're a bit more flexible with the requirements for funding. So back to that 5C, the 5 C's of credit, they might take a little bit lower of a credit score if you don't have like a 700, 720. They might be more okay with that 680 or something. They also ask questions. They'll have a one-on-one, conversation with you to say, okay, we see your credit score is a little bit low. Tell me about how that happened. What was the issue? How was it resolved? And we can go from there with that information. It's just a little bit more personal, and they'll kind of have a little bit more wiggle room to work with you. Many times there's better loan terms. Specifically, the Park Community Loan has, if you pay in full on time each month and you pay the full amount of the loan, you're refunded the total amount of interest at the end of the life of the loan, which is a fantastic option for a small business. And then they're dedicated to helping small businesses. So we partner with them a lot. If they, if someone comes to them first and they say, okay, you need some more solid financial projections and to work on your business plan a little bit, I'm going to send you over to the SBDC first. We'll work together and then we'll partner back with you to get you through that loan. And so they really are dedicated to their clients and want to see you all succeed. We've got one more chat question. I see. I'm looking for small business grants. I can touch on those as well. Yeah. I will say, we'll just interject. I didn't include grants in here specifically. What I often see grants best used for is a specific item within your business or a specific project within your business, not necessarily starting the business overall. They're becoming a lot, they already weren't very available, and they're becoming increasingly less available as political climates change, funding options change. I always say you should definitely apply for grants if they come along. I don't want to hinder you from that, but make sure you are still focusing on other ways to fund your business and run your business, and don't just become focused on just applying for grants. I also say they're like a nice cherry on top, but not necessarily going to help you immediately get started. Another option for lending is furniture, fixtures, and equipment. So we've got a couple groups around town. They call themselves leasing groups. And so they will fund specifically furniture, fixtures, and equipment for your business. So they don't give you working capital. They don't give you money for renovations, but they do lend only on the pieces of equipment that you would need for your business or the items you need to include in your space. It's great to pair like with a microloan. So say if you need a juice processor that's $20,000 and you need a little bit of working capital, that $10,000 loan from Park Community plus this loan specifically on the piece of equipment can be put together, applying for both of those, and that's a nice way to get the full amount that you may need. So it's a nice complement to other things. And down here, like I said, they're perfect for one specific piece of equipment, especially if you're a growing business. If you're saying, okay, we're getting more orders than we really have capacity for, we're going to need to up our production. Okay, well, what does that look like? We need more equipment. We need a piece of equipment that is an industrial piece as opposed to like the at-home version, right? Well, that costs money. And so as you're getting started or growing, having those growing pains, this is a great option for just getting, one piece that's going to help you grow faster and larger. Another option for funding is tenant improvement allowances. So many times as you're looking for your, ideal location with a business, we are going to talk to landlords, ask about, price per square foot, what utilities are included, what does the lease term look like? And this is another negotiating piece, is the improvement allowance that the landlord can give. So many landlords do this because it's a draw to come lease their space, right? So they will invest a certain amount of money into the improvement for the space, whether it's a build out or a renovation or what have you. If you need to put new flooring in, or if you need to paint, or if you need to change some plumbing or electricity within the building, they can say, okay, we'll put in $20,000 to help you get this space into the working shape that it needs to be in for your business. And so this is a fantastic way to leverage other, money out there in order to get started. Often will bring down the renovation cost and your startup costs by a very good amount. And it's negotiable too. Sometimes landlords just put it, invest right in. Other times they may be taking a certain percentage out of your rent each month. So you are paying for it in the long run, but it's not an initial upfront cost that you're paying immediately. So it does lower the amount of money you need to just get started. It can cover, basic renovations, furniture, fixtures, equipment, things like that. So definitely ask about this as you're out and about looking at locations. See what the landlord's willing to do and what they're open to, because I think that's a great way. It benefits everyone. It benefits you because of your startup costs. It benefits them because they're getting a tenant in there, and then they're going to be able to, do their thing with leasing the property. Dealership or vendor financing is another way to kind of creatively use funding. So if you need to have a business vehicle, you can just do a dealership financing package for the vehicle. Say if you're a catering company or a mobile something or other, you may want to fund the actual vehicle through the dealership you're purchasing from. That's probably going to have a little bit better of a rate as opposed to a traditional small business loan. And it's a lot simpler of a process. So it's generally easy application process. You're not giving them financial projections. You're not giving them a business plan. They may ask for a summary, but it may just be as simple as if you were buying a personal vehicle. So it doesn't need to be tied to a business plan or projections. Also, different vendors can do this. So if you need other types of equipment that you would just purchase straight from the vendor that makes it, you can finance it that way as opposed to having to use a traditional business loan for that. So again, it breaks down the large expense into smaller pieces along the way, making it easier to get funded for it. And we've got a line of credit, which is another great option to pair with a business loan. So it's used for purchasing inventory or small wares, kind of like those quick turnover things where you're going to buy the inventory, buy the pieces you'll need to produce your product, sell it, immediately be able to pay off that credit card balance. You can use it on an as-need basis, which means that there's no need for a monthly loan repayment. So that kind of lowers your overhead monthly costs, which is always great in a new business scenario. And then I always like to make sure to use it responsibly. You don't want to keep a high balance on that line of credit. You want to do it like a personal credit card, pay it off at the end of every month, make sure you're back to zero on the balance, and keep in good standing there, because you don't want it to ding your credit. But it is a great tool to use as you're getting started. There's always odds and ends that you're going to need to purchase, last minute things as you're getting started. And so this line of credit is great as opposed to having to build that into a business loan. And then lastly, we've got a ROBS investment. This stands for a rollover for business startups. And this comes from your retirement savings. So this is most commonly used through like a 401k program, a traditional IRA, 403b, other, items that you've already invested into. You can transfer money from one of these retirement accounts or savings accounts into the purchase of a new business or the startup of a new business, buying a franchise. And the money then is pulled and then it's counted as equity. So that's a personal owner investment, right? So if you need a really large amount of a loan, this could be a good option for you, because this is often a larger amount of money that folks have accessible to. And so it can go for that larger owner investment that you're going to need to have in order to get that larger loan in general. There are some cautions around it. So initially, there's no tax penalties as you're rolling it over, or for early withdrawal, because you're investing it into something else. You're investing it into the business. It's debt-free money. You've already saved it up. There's no collateral that's required to draw from it. And then the qualification's generally easier than SBA loan, because it's your personal money that you're using. However, it is riskier because if the business fails, you could risk losing your retirement savings. So that is something to deeply look at before you move forward on. Also consider that if you're taking money out of your money markets, you're losing the ability to, gain more money in that same area. So it's definitely needing to weigh the pros and cons, but it is one avenue to larger funding that I've seen people be successful with. And it mostly depends on how solid you feel in the business itself. Like, is this a business that's, a need for people or a want for people? Is it very sustainable and proven track record, or is it a little risky in essence already? Those are some of the questions that I would ask before I would think about using a rollover business investment. So those are the kind of 10 funding hacks, creative funding hacks that we have to use in order to get started. Now we're going to look at a few scenarios here, kind of see what the best options are. So identify your best options to secure funding. We are going to do that through breaking up your startup costs by type, assessing your timeline for when to expect the cost to incur to you, and then start, with the timeline and the startup costs one step forward and moving forward. And then I've got a little recap. So initially, you applied for a $500,000 loan. Well, actually, when you came to the SBDC, wrote your business plan, did your detailed startup costs, you realized you actually didn't need that much because you have a really detailed plan now and you know exactly what you need. You actually only needed $200,000. So let's break that down a little bit. You had an office space that you renovated. You were given $20,000 through a tenant improvement allowance through the landlord for $20,000. That covered those renovations. You took a microloan through a traditional bank for $50,000, and that's going to cover your working capital, additional, need for renovations, so on and so forth. You did some bootstrapping initially. You have an owner investment of $5,000. That $5,000 is the 10% needed to invest in order to secure that $50,000 microloan. You also took a line of credit out for $100,000. This goes towards your inventory and small wares purchases right before you get started, and as you're beginning to generate revenue. That was a $100,000 line of credit. And then there was some equipment you needed to purchase, so you did an equipment financing loan for $25,000. And so this comes to $200,000 in total startup costs. And by breaking it down like this, it just becomes a lot more attainable, accessible for you to get these smaller dollar amounts when you need them, as opposed to that one large balloon upfront cost or chunk of money to start. I've got some other kind of scenarios to see kind of, okay, I've got 3 different industries here that we can look at to see how they're broken down. And this is, I took these from samples from different clients of mine. So these are real life examples. So if someone's building out a restaurant, they had a tenant improvement allowance of $35,000 from the landlord. They took a traditional business loan of $90,000 for the rest of the building renovations that they need, because building out a kitchen is quite expensive in the restaurant space. They had an initial owner investment of $9,000, and that took care of their, upfront administrative costs, first month's rent, utilities, deposits, things like that. They also took a $50,000 line of credit to help with small purchases at the beginning, glassware, china, some inventory, things like that. And then they needed a little bit extra cash right before they opened because they spent everything they had so far to use to get started, and they needed a little pad. So they took a $10,000 microloan to have for working capital. And total, it's $194,000, but broken down, they've used these different options for funding in order to make it a bit more attainable. That way, they're not paying $194,000 on loan payments, broken down loan payments every month. They're only paying on that $90,000 loan every month, which is much more attainable and doable. Here's a veterinary clinic. So the owner invested $30,000. That was something that they had saved up for quite a while because they knew that they were going to open this eventually. They took an SBA loan for $100,000 for build out of the space. And they also took a $50,000 line of credit for inventory replenishment, supplies, medical supplies, medicine, things like that. And then they did equipment financing for some of the technology that they needed in the space, and that was $160,000. So their total startup cost was $340,000, but they've broken it down in a way that's just much more attainable. And then lastly, I've got a trucking company. So they needed a very large amount of startup costs. These cost a lot of money, lots of insurance that goes into it, paying upfront, fuel, so on and so forth. So their startup costs were very significant. They've got a startup of 1.57 million. So they were very secure in the business. They'd worked in the industry for over 50 years. They understood what they were doing, and they felt very safe taking a Rob's investment out of their 401k savings and putting that into the business. They then also applied for an SBA loan for $260,000, a line of credit for $250,000, and then they did some dealership financing for some of their trucks at $560,000. And that's how you see how this is a really good example of breaking down into smaller pieces, because I can guarantee you, if they had gone to the bank and asked for $1.5 million, they would have immediately been told no and no questions asked. But if they can show through business plan, through owner investment, through the experience they have in the industry, and through their credit worthiness, that they're able to take on these investments broken down, they came to that 1.5 million that they needed and were able to successfully open the business. So these are just different ways that I see it play out in real time. Obviously, the smaller the dollar amount, it's kind of the easier it is to get funding. It just takes less restrictions away, less, ask of you personally for that owner investment and collateral. And it's just easy. The loan application process is easier, so on and so forth. So I'm always looking at different ways to kind of put these together in a way that makes sense. And that's kind of what the work we do at SBDC kind of complements your businesses. And then we get to the finish line. You've used creative funding hacks, and you can fund your small business. And you will feel so happy and proud. And then that's just getting started. Then you have to go run your business. But you'll be great at it. We're here to support you. And then I've got my info here, my email, claire.bridges@uky.edu. And so please feel free to reach out with questions. I will share this with Janet, and she will send it out to everyone that's registered for the class today. Feel free to ask questions now, or if you have questions in the future as you're reviewing the info, always reach out. I see Cynthia asked follow up for the grants. Grant writing could be a good class to have. Yeah, I think that could be a great tool. I think also looking through LFPL, the Louisville Public Library, they've got some grant writing resources as well. Does anyone else have questions? If you do, just drop them in the chat and we can talk specifically about any of the hacks or any types of loans or anything like that. Wait and see. Got any? Great information. Thank you, Portia.
Well, Claire, I want to thank you for coming in today and filling in for Dave as well. Kind of
Absolutely.
both at once. So again, we are, okay, so we'll be sharing that. Claire, if you'll send me your slides, I'll get that to everyone probably in the morning. Stick around just for a second. We also have an evaluation if you'll fill that out for us. So thanks again, Claire.
Absolutely. Thank you, Janet. I am putting my email in the chat right now. I see one person asking about one-on-one coaching. So feel free to grab that email, send me, a little intro and we can get started. And then I will share my slides and we can move forward that way.
And I'll share Claire in the follow-up as well. So you guys will have that. If you don't necessarily think of something to ask today, you'll have it for any future
Perfect.
questions. Again, thank you, Claire, and we'll see everyone next week.
Next Tuesday. Wonderful.
Yes.
Thanks. Have a great day,
Thanks.
everybody.
Bye, everyone.